Also, I feel like culturally and just how fast paced our lives are, that's why the Sabbath is so transformative. And I feel like God knew that that's what we needed because we can really just be on a rat race, right? And we can just be going and not rest and then look at God and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I need rest. And he's like, I gave you a day for rest. Hey, beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new here, make sure you click that subscribe button. I would love for you to join the family. So today's video, we're going to talk about the Sabbath. We're going to talk about the only commandment that all Christ followers cannot agree on, but we're going to talk about why I still observe the Sabbath and how it has changed my life. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get straight into it. So, as many of us know, Exodus 20 talks about the 10 commandments. These are the 10 commandments that God gave the Israelites when He delivered them out of Egypt, and commandments that Christ followers live by to make sure that we're right with God and just kind of help us on our journey. And the fourth of the 10 commandments says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or your sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Y'all, that is a mouthful. I will say that the fourth commandment is definitely one of the most descriptive commandments. You know, there's like, you should not murder, you should not commit adultery, you should not have false idols. And that one is kind of descriptive too. But the fourth commandment is very descriptive and definitely shows that God wanted the Israelites to understand it and wanted to give it more context. I do want to start off by saying I do understand the controversy around the Sabbath and why some people feel like, absolutely you need to observe the Sabbath on Saturday or even Sunday. Other people feel like it's not that serious. I know for some people this contention stems from Romans 14, where Paul talks about not judging one another and also not arguing over opinions in the faith. Like if someone is weak in the faith and thinks one thing, not arguing with them if you think another thing. And one of the things he talks about is esteeming different days. So he says one person esteems one day as better than another, while another esteems all days alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. The one who observes the day observes it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats, eats in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the one who abstains, abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. So some people see this and they're like, yeah, see, we don't have to observe the Sabbath because, you know, it's just not that important to argue over opinions or what day it is and things of that nature. Some scholars think that he's talking about different cultural holidays. Some people think that he is talking about the Sabbath and saying that if you're convinced that you should esteem that day above others and do that, and if not, it's okay. I would say for me that I didn't really grow up learning that much about the Sabbath, so I kind of innately felt like Sunday was the Sabbath just because I was going to church. So I was like, oh, I'm observing the Sabbath by going to church. And the more and more I learned about the Sabbath, I was like, it don't say nothing about going to church in the Bible when it comes to the Sabbath. Like, yes, that's important and that matters, but the Sabbath is more about resting and making sure you're not working and making sure you're doing things that are revitalizing to your body so that you can be the best version of yourself for the rest of the week. And when I learned about it and also just learned about what Jesus said about the Sabbath, I was like, whoa, this is actually important. Personally, I'm under the notion that if God tells us to do something, it's for our good. So the fact that Jesus didn't come on the scene and say, like, y'all have been told that you need to observe the Sabbath, but I'm here to tell you otherwise. I still believe the Sabbath is relevant, just because Jesus did not come on the scene and say that. However, he did come and give clarity to the Sabbath because a lot of people back then were abusing it and being really legalistic with it, and trying to accuse people of working on the Sabbath in very like stringent and legalistic ways. And Jesus gave clarity to that. So he talks about the Sabbath in all of the Gospels. Specifically, he talks about the Sabbath in Mark 2 verse 23. Basically, it's a story of the disciples pulling grain in these grain fields and these Pharisees coming to them and saying, see, your disciples are working on the Sabbath, they're pulling grain, they're doing work. And Jesus basically tells them, like, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Like, he just dropped bars. What Jesus is basically saying is we were not created to be slaves to the Sabbath, like, oh, it's Sabbath, I have to do all these things, I have to move this way. Like the Sabbath was created for us. It was created as a way to remind us to rest and a way to remind us to breathe and not work and take a break. And I think that's how I approach the Sabbath, as a day that I get to have and as a day that I want to have, specifically when I have really, really busy weeks. It also gives me a chance to say no. Like it also gives me a chance to just really be like, hey, I can't do that today. What about tomorrow? Like when I'm really tired. And I think that is freeing and it actually is very, very beautiful. Also, I feel like culturally and just how fast paced our lives are, that's why the Sabbath is so transformative. And I feel like God knew that that's what we needed, because we can really just be on a rat race, right? And we can just be going and not rest and then look at God and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I need rest. And he's like, I gave you a day for rest. I think it's so kind that God literally calls us to rest. He gives us a commandment like, hey, rest, like breathe. It's okay. Like you don't have to go all the time. You don't have to work every day. And I remember for me, the Sabbath came out of a time of desperation because I was at a point where I was technically working 7 days out of the week because of how my meetings fell. And I was like, dang, this isn't sustainable. Like, this doesn't feel good. Even if it's just one work meeting, one work phone call, like, I don't want to work every day of the week. And I began to observe the Sabbath. And it was very freeing for me to just be like, oh, I'm not doing any work today. I'm going to do things I like to do. Like, I'm going to do things outside. I'm going to spend time with people I love. I'm going to do things that make me feel good. I'm going to do things that connect me back to God, make me fill up my cup spiritually. Like, I'm going to do things that I want to do on this day, and I'm going to rest, and that is okay. So for me, the Sabbath was very freeing. And it was also, so because I never grew up observing the Sabbath, it became like something for me to learn and something for me to grow deeper in. And now me and my husband observe the Sabbath together, and we're learning and continually learning about it. But it's not a legalistic thing. And I will say we're not even perfect when it comes to it, like quote unquote perfect. I don't know what that means, because again, the Sabbath was created for man. So I don't know if it's like any perfect way to do it. But for example, if someone's having something on a Saturday, because that's when we observe Sabbath, we're like, if it's a wedding or a graduation party, like we're going to go. We're going to support people we care about, people we love. We just try not to fill up our schedules on Saturday. So that's what it looks like for us. We try to spend time together, sleep in. No alarm clock is a beautiful thing. Spend time with God, eat really, really, really good food, spend time in nature, spend time with people we care about. Ideally, for me, I don't want to like have to go anywhere where I'm spending money and forcing other people to work. So that's something to think about. Like if it's a Sabbath for me and I'm resting, I don't want to be forcing anyone else to work on the Sabbath. So even how in Exodus I read how it says like, you don't work, neither your children or your servant or anyone in your household is working. So I try to abide by that, right? I try to not let any of us work per se, where we're like doing something for our jobs or doing something for our businesses. And I also don't like to make other people work for me. So I try to do that, but that sometimes that looks like us resting all throughout the day and doing things that fill us up. My husband loves working out on the Sabbath because that's something that refreshes him, all that stuff. And then sometimes in the evening, like if we don't have food or if we didn't plan well, to be honest, sometimes we do have to grab something. So I will say that happens. But again, it's a learning process. And I think it's just a beautiful thing to be able to keep that commandment and walk with God through that process of learning what it means to rest. And I think for everyone, it's going to look different. The main thing to focus on is keeping the day holy. And holy means set apart. So just making sure that your Sabbath is just different than every other day, making sure you are able to rest and you're not just like rushing through the day. You don't have back-to-back things that drain you. You aren't spending all this time and at the end of the day wondering where your day went. Like all the natural feelings you get by just having a busy week, you want to pause and make sure you are doing things that don't give you that feeling at the end of a Sabbath. So that's also a good way to think about it. Like what is restful to you? What's rejuvenizing to you? What really makes you feel like you have been able to pause and just enjoy life and pour back into yourself spiritually as well. So for me, not all my Sabbaths look the same, but most of them start off with a very slow morning. I don't set an alarm on Sabbaths if I don't need to, and I wake up when my body tells me to. We make breakfast because I love breakfast food. I spend time with my husband. I spend intentional time with the Lord. Um, And then I'll like catch up with people if I want to, or maybe I'll lounge around and read a book if I want to. It just kind of depends on the day. A lot of times, if I know I have something in the evening, like if I am going out to hang out with people or something like that, I make sure the beginning of my day in the afternoon is very, very restful and very slow, and just something that makes me feel like I'm giving myself what I need and not just rushing through the day, I think is really important. When I used to live in Florida, I used to go to the beach a lot on my Sabbaths, and that was super restful for me. So everyone's restful is going to look different, and you just have to do what is really restful and rejuvenating for you. This can include a lot of things like spending time with people you care about, reading a book, stretching, working out, spending time in the sun, making love with your spouse, spending intentional time with your children. The important thing is to remember it's not just about not working, it's about resting. So just make sure that you rest. If you do observe the Sabbath, I would love to know how you do that down below in the comments. Definitely let me know. I love talking to you guys and creating a community on this side of the internet. Okay, y'all, hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you have an amazing week. Leave any questions, comments, or suggestions down below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, turn notification bell, all that good stuff. And most importantly, don't forget that your life is totally worth living. I love you, and I'll see you next week. Bye.